that Death Before Dishonor 2021 did seem like a goodbye to a lot of people. So would you have been satisfied with what you'd accomplished in the wrestling business if it was your goodbye?
Hey guys, this is Tempest from Wrestle Talk, and I'm reminding you to support Tom Talks Rubbish.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talks Rubbish, and stand back for another interview. This time, I'm joined by Rich Lobezno from Ring of Honor. So welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing, Tom? Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here with you guys today.
So if we take this back, how do you first discover wrestling?
Oof. I mean, I'm going back about probably 7 or 8. I'm thinking as far back as I can remember. It was, what we did on Saturdays. Watch cartoons in the morning, and then at 12 o'clock, boom, WWF Superstars would come on, or I think it was Superstars on Saturdays. I can't, I forget the nomenclature, but yeah, I'd watch that at noon, and then I would also watch WCW Saturday night at 6:05 on TBS, and I'd watch the Saturday night show as well. Get the pay-per-views if I could convince my folks to get them, and the local video stores, which I feel like a dinosaur talking about, but the local video stores were the best. They would have tons of tapes, and we had memberships at all the little ones around here, and I would exhaust them, to the point where I didn't even have to go with my mom. I mean, by the time I was like 10, I think I could just walk in. They knew who I was. They knew I was getting wrestling. They wouldn't even make me pay. They would just like, oh, your mom will pay next time she comes in, and I could just get all the wrestling I could. So,
oh wow,
yeah.
Okay, so this is it sounds like the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, just about it. So I'm an old head. So born in 82. So yeah, like late 80s. You're talking. I think the first WrestleMania that I remember ordering on pay-per-view was probably WrestleMania 8. So you're looking at, I think that's 1992, but I'd been watching all the other ones. Yeah, okay. So right about then.
So the thing that I'm always curious to know from my guests is if you discovered that type of wrestling in like the very cartoonish side at the age you are now with no prior wrestling experience, do you think you'd be into it? And then the inverse of that question of if you discovered today's wrestling as a child with no prior knowledge, do you think you'd be into it?
It's a really tough one. I mean, I think that, one of the things that I enjoyed, I mean, WCW was obviously a bit different and it was less gimmicky than WWF was at that time. I think the larger than life characters appeal to me. I was a huge fan of Hogan and Macho and Macho Man, of course, just one of my favorites. And who else? Ultimate Warrior. So some of the really big personalities were my favorites. And that kind of got me into it. And, I don't think you have that same. You don't have those. I don't think you have the characters as much anymore. That we've kind of like moved away from that a bit. So I don't know, like if today's wrestling would have appealed to me just as much as it did back then. It was like lightning in a bottle. I mean, it was essentially made for kids. I mean, I got to go to the toy store, and there were wrestling buddies, and now we have wrestling buddies too. But that's like on that side of it. But it's hard for me to picture a life without wrestling, if I have to be honest with you. I'm kind of trying to extrapolate and think about it a little bit, but at the same time, it's difficult because it's been such a huge part of my life that this idea that I wouldn't be watching it is kind of crazy.
Fair enough. So if we move on your fandom a bit, have you had like a lapse period where you stopped watching?
There was there's a slightly embarrassing story tied to it. I would say heading into high school, I had been watching Monday Night Raw, and here in the States, there was a show after Raw called Silk Stockings. And at the time, it was kind of like a racy detective show kind of thing. And I'd fallen asleep watching Raw. And my grandmother walked in and saw this show on and thought that I was watching it. So she canceled our cable. So I didn't have access. Yeah, no, I couldn't. There was a good, I want to say, year or two period. So almost right as the Attitude Era was taking off, or just before it. I want to put this around, maybe this was like 1995, right? Something like that, 95, 94. She cancels the cable. So now I'm out of luck. I didn't know where to find anything on the internet. So for a bit, I was disconnected. I was still getting WWE, WWF magazine, and I would kind of try to pay attention to it that way. And that was like the early, I was finding some message boards about what was happening. So I'd stay in the loop. But there was about a 2-year period, I would say from like the end of 7th grade to about the beginning of high school where that happened. And then I had finally convinced her to luckily rebuy it, and and then, then everything was taking off with the Attitude Era. I mean, I remember walking around school and kids were, tons of Austin shirts and stuff like that. So people were stunning each other in the hallways.
Oh, wow. So what is something that maybe you've gone back to watch from that sort of 95, 97 era that you're like, damn it, I missed out on this? And then what is something that you're like, yeah, I'm okay that I wasn't a fan during this period?
Oh, some of the In Your House. I remember, see, again, I'm showing my age, but I remember when there were only 4 pay-per-views a year. It was so much easier to keep track of. I think that became a problem too, because we didn't have the money. It wasn't a thing that we were going to get a pay-per-view every single month. So I couldn't get all the In Your Houses. So it had become difficult to kind of keep up with that. And, so I'm kind of glad in a way, because I feel like a lot of the In Your Houses were underwhelming. Okay. Some of those cards are good, but if you look at a majority of them, they were, they weren't
great.
Exactly. They weren't the pay-per-views I remember, and especially because Survivor Series, for example, and Royal Rumble were so specialized that they were so, there was different, something stuck out about them. So, missing the In Your House era, I think some of the beginnings of the In Your House era was something that I don't regret.
How do you then come to work in the wrestling business? Was your first job with Ring of Honor, or was there sort of a more journeyman side?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's a little bit more of a journeyman side. So what happened was my friend and I had I had moved from one part of New York City to another part. So my friend and I hadn't seen each other as much, and we decided at the time that we'd start a podcast because nobody else was doing that. No, we were not. We were not at all the first one, and we had a small following, a smattering, and one thing that I tried to do was to find an avenue so that we would get more listeners. So I remember being on vacation. I think it was in Cape Cod. And I was reading something from Last Word on Sports, and actually they had a Last Word on Wrestling kind of subsection of their site.
Was that rare at that time?
Let me see. You know what? This wasn't that long ago. I would say, it's so about. You're looking at about 10 years ago, 9 years ago. There were a number of sites, but they were looking for writers. So I think I wrote something about The Undertaker or something that's coming up. I think SummerSlam was coming up, and I wrote something about him and submitted it, and then was brought aboard. And I started kind of like writing my wrestling articles, and then slowly I asked if I could also include the podcast. So I started doing that as well. And what started happening was a suggestion my friend had was go to some local shows that nobody else is covering. So I started to go to Fighting Spirit Pro Wrestling. It was run by Joel of the I had name you wrote something about one of our shows, and I was like, oh yeah. So he asked if I was interested in doing anything in wrestling, and I was very excited. So I started doing post match interviews for FSW. Some of the guys that were there at that time. MJF was there. Was on these shows. I was doing those, and then I started. Then FSW kind of closed, and then I also worked with Five Borough Wrestling. So I was doing basically post-match interviews with all of them, editing the content, and then sending it back to them, or sometimes uploading it myself to the websites. Ooh. And through that, I actually, I was still going to Ring of Honor stuff. And what I started to do was actually I'd gotten in touch with the PR guy over at Ring of Honor at the time, Mark Kruskal. He's a great guy. And he, through Ian Riccaboni, I can't thank him enough. I had started to, just kind of DM some of the ROH guys and ask if they wanted to do a podcast. And they were, always willing to do it.
Sounds very much like my process.
Yeah, I mean that you gotta start somewhere, and then there's also this little line of at a certain point I'm covering the shows, but then I was doing stuff for these other companies, and basically I formed a friendship with LSG, Leon St. Giovanni. He was at a number of the Brooklyn shows that I was working, and we went to a Red Bulls game together because I'm actually a season ticket holder of the Red Bulls. And at that game, I had already moved from the city to the suburbs. And I just wasn't doing a lot of shows because it just became, one thing was when I lived right near the shows, staying out till 12:30. My son was born. So I felt, being out of the house that long, I wasn't getting paid really much at all. Mm-hmm. So basically after that, we're at the game and he says, what do you want to do in wrestling? And I said, I'd love to do Spanish commentary. And he's like, oh, really? And I'm like, yeah, So 3 days later, my phone rings and it's LSG. And he says, hey, do you think you would be able to get to Baltimore this weekend for Best of the World 2018?
Ooh.
And I was like, of course. And he's like, well, we have a spot for Spanish commentary. And I got to speak to Alex Abrahantes, who's currently working with AEW. And we chatted for a bit. We found out that we're both of Cuban descent, so we had that in common. And we worked the show. And God bless him, he got me through it. Learning the ins and outs. But a lot of us say this to ourselves, right? You sit there and you've kind of been doing it in your head for a long time.
Definitely.
My friends remember me turning down the volume and us calling the matches, just kind of for fun. So I was, it was scary, but I had such a great time seeing. And then what was nice was I had interviewed so many of the guys on the roster that when I showed up to the taping the first time to that pay-per-view, I knew some of them, so that made me feel a lot more at ease. And, the pandemic derailed things for a little bit, but I had been working a lot of the shows up to that. Pandemic changed things a little bit. But then when we came out of pandemic, Ring of Honor and everyone there was so great. Even during it, they would reach out to me. I would do small bits of content for week by week. Also, they had me record something during National Hispanic Recognition Month here in the United States. So, they kind of kept me on, and obviously, from there, like you did, like we all did, I found out that Tony Khan had purchased Ring of Honor by watching TV. My jaw drops because
what, you didn't know?
Well, no. So we worked the Death Before Dishonor 2021 was kind of, it felt like a goodbye.
Everyone thought that Ring of Honor was done. in the wrestling community, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. And, we had like a nice little send off, and it was a really emotional event. A lot of people were saying goodbye to each other, and they knew that this might be, for a long time. So, I kind of I didn't really have any other prospects or ideas to really do much. I had been doing some local stuff, doing some ring announcing for some Spanish wrestling kind of companies in New York City. Guys who would bring, they'd bring up like CMLL guys or AAA guys. I had also gotten way into Lucha Libre. And when I went down to Mexico, I was actually able to meet the lead commentator for CMLL. Kind of worked with, not really worked with them, but I was on like one of their interview programs, and I was hyping up. Actually, I think it was Death Before Dishonor, which was going to be a card where Volador was going to face off against Matt Taven. So, doing a lot of those things was great, but then sitting there. And after the goodbye on 2021, I'm thinking I'm done. I'm thinking I'm never doing anything again, and this is probably the end of it for me. And I appreciated it. I mean, I had gotten to call a show at Madison Square Garden in front of 16,000.
Yes, because obviously you got to do the New Japan Ring of Honor show, correct?
Yeah. So I said to myself, hey, they brought me into the very end, and this was going to be it, and then there was the announcement that the show was going to happen. I was reached out to and asked if I could do it. And I, of course, said 100%. Was very excited. Then Tony bought the company, and I was kind of in a state of limbo. I wasn't sure if I was going to be brought in. True enough, and all the thanks to Tony Khan for still holding me, keeping that booking in line. Like he could have decided to wipe everything off and bring in, completely new commentary crew.
Because I suppose AEW has their own Spanish guys, so he could have thought, we'll use our own guys.
Yeah, Alex, who had worked with the Ring of Honor, was working for AEW at the time. He still is, and Dasha is working there, and Alex Riojos. So they have a squad there, John Cruz and Angelico also. So they had options, and me and my partner Amy Rose for Ring of Honor. We were both booked for the show, so that was great. And we went down to Texas, and we went into it saying this might be our last show ever, or this is kind of like an audition. So do our best, and lo and behold, I was then contacted to do the Ring of Honor the Death Before Dishonor pay-per-view, which I was very excited about, and I've had a couple chances to go down. I just recently went down to AEW Dark tapings, and had a great time there, meeting a lot of a lot of the talent that worked at Dark tapings, and that was a really great experience. It was actually really nice.
That sounds dope.
Really enjoyed that. So kind of that's been a little bit of the path. It wasn't linear. It hasn't been my day job. I'm a teacher. Outside of this, but I've counted myself very lucky to be able to do all this, and sometimes it's right place, right time,
Definitely. You spoke about there, and I am really curious to know that Death Before Dishonor 2021 did seem like a goodbye to a lot of people. So would you have been satisfied with what you'd accomplished in the wrestling business if it was your goodbye?
Yeah, I felt I did. After Final Battle, I really felt like that was.
Oh, was it Final Battle? My bad.
I was happy. I was. Oh, no worries. Yeah, no, I was. I felt okay. This is the company's closing, and I was okay with that. Because I'd only worked for Ring of Honor. I worked for the smaller, independents, but really in terms of a major position, it was only Ring of Honor. And I was a fan before I started doing commentary. One of the things I think that made me good at what I did was that I was following the product.
Yeah.
I watched it. I watched every minute of Ring of Honor that was on. So when they brought me in, I was like, yeah, no, I know what's going on because I've been watching it.
Yeah.
You know, I could bring up something from years before because I had been watching it for so long. So I was okay at that point, you know, when then you know, when it turned around and there was going to be a new show, you know, I was like, oh, so excited, and to be part of it again felt, you know, amazing. And I said to myself in Dallas, you know, you don't know what's going to happen, but you know, just get on there, put on your headset, do your best, and hopefully good things will come.
Definitely. And I did have the chance to listen to your commentary, and I really enjoyed it. Even though I don't speak Spanish, you really made it accessible for like English speakers, which I found was really cool. I will say that. So
Thank you very much.
When it comes to Ring of Honor now being produced by AEW, what was some changes that maybe you saw when you were calling the latest pay-per-view compared to previous times?
Well, you know, I gotta say, a lot of maybe just the wider scale of it. You know, there's just so it felt like there were so many more people involved.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the biggest thing, I think. Also, I mean, I think Ian Riccaboni and Caprice will agree. We had these little stools that we sat in that were I just found them to be so annoying. It was so hard. You know, you're sitting there for 4 hours. There were times where I was just, and I do this naturally too. There are times where I just stand because I'm actually getting excited about what I'm calling.
I was just going to ask you that question.
But no, definitely I know it sounds so silly, but the chairs were different, you know. The other thing is at Death Before Dishonor, we were up high actually. We were like in the I want to say like above the bowl area. So normally we're like a little further down, but you know, when you're on commentary, you're not actually calling what you can see outside of your screen.
You're watching it on a screen, correct?
Oh yeah, and it's always you know what's in front of the fan on the screen. So even if somebody is running down to the ring, I can see it in my periphery, but until you see it, I don't say anything.
Yeah.
So it kind of doesn't really matter where you're placed overall. But yeah, I'd say the biggest change, because you know everyone who I worked with in Ring of Honor, all the guys who worked in production, you know, were just great guys, so easy to work with. I can't say enough about them, you know. So, but definitely for me, I think it's the scale of the operation.
Fair enough. What are some things that maybe you don't want to change with Ring of Honor now they're acquired by AEW? And then what are some things that you're like, okay, I'd like to see this maybe improve or like get bigger sort of thing?
I think that Ring of Honor has a different feel than AEW does in terms of some of the kind of the, you know, historically the way the matches have been and kind of this idea. And, you know, AEW does do the wins-loss record and everything like that. But there's a little bit of maybe a grittiness a little bit to Ring of Honor. That's a little bit that I'd like to kind of stay, you know, as part of it. I think the pure title is really important as being something that needs to stay that way. You know, in terms of things that I would change, I mean, honestly, it's just to get more eyes on Ring of Honor. The last two shows, and I would say a lot of it comes from the promotion, right, on Dynamite and on Rampage and on AEW Dark and on AEW Dark Elevation, right? Those you can we all saw the numbers, right? The buy rates are through the roof, and
it was like record buy rates, wasn't it? If I remember correctly.
You know, and I'd have to, you know, I think you'd be remiss if you didn't acknowledge that a lot of that was just there were more eyes on the product because it was in a place that was a little bit more accessible. You know, a frustration I had even when before I worked for Ring of Honor was I was the Ring of Honor like reporter for a couple of sites. Yeah. And one thing that frustrated me was the shows would come out Saturday on Sinclair Broadcasting in some areas. But in New York City, you could not actually see it on Saturday night. So I waited till Monday to watch it. And that was a little bit of a frustration. You know, that definitely was difficult. And and I watch it on Fight, which was a great place to access all the stuff. But at the same time, there's something about picking up your TV. And I know now we're in the age of streaming, but I still think there's something about being able to take your TV remote on and put the show on,
I agree.
And I think that's for me in terms of changes, more eyes, AEW broadcasts in, many countries. I don't even know the number, but so many countries around the world,
I don't want to try and say it in case I butcher it. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's so many places around the world. And also that means that there are more Spanish speakers who have access to the product and to, my work as well, so being able to have that opportunity is actually, I think those are like some changes I would say I'd look forward to.
If Ring of Honor, I know you spoke about being not happy that you were done, but like satisfied with what you've accomplished in Ring of Honor. If, say, for example, 1 week Caprice Coleman can't work a show, and they asked you to step in and do the English commentary, would that be something you'd be comfortable with, or is it like Spanish is my role sort of thing?
Well, I'd be amenable to it, right? I can speak in English as well. There is something about doing it in Spanish that I found to be especially rewarding. And for me, one of those things was, I lived with my grandparents growing up. So that's one of the ways how I started speaking Spanish. When I wasn't living with them anymore, as I got older and I moved out, I started to lose that. And my grandmother, I just, you don't use it, you lose it. And my grandmother at the time had said to me that I was trying to speak to her in Spanish one day, and she said, please speak to me in English. I can't understand you. Like it was so choppy and broken that she couldn't understand me. And when my son was born, basically I started to dive into reading more. One of the reasons why I'm into Lucha Libre is actually not because of my childhood, but it's actually recent. It's within the last 10 years. And it's because when my son was born, I wanted to be able to speak to him about wrestling. And I realized I didn't know the names of the moves in Spanish, right? So I started watching that. So in many ways, Spanish commentary for me is one, it constantly pushes me to get better and to expand my vocabulary. I'm always watching stuff. I'm taking notes down. If I hear a phrase that I really like, I'll jot it down. I mean, I told Julio Cesar Rivera from CMLL, I went up to him and told him straight up, I take your lines and write them down. I like some of his phrasing so much. So of course, if I had the chance to sit at the English commentary booth, it's like sit by Tony Schiavone, right? Taz, Excalibur, that it would be amazing. Ian, right? I love work. Ian is a great guy. I love working on the commentary with him. Just before the shows, we get to talk about, share. He's amazing. He's amazing with these amazing little facts that he has. And he's got his notebook, and I want to steal his notebook all the time. So, if they asked me would I do it, yes. If I never do it, would it be a regret or something I felt like I missed out on? No, because I've just kind of been locked into this Spanish, and it's, for me, it's also demonstrating to my son that being bilingual is actually important and that you can use it as a tool. So every show I go to is another, every time, he couldn't make it to Boston with me for Death Before Dishonor, but he's watching at home, and that's something that for me is very special, that he gets to hear not just me, but me speaking Spanish.
That's really cool. How easy is it for you to slip in and out of Spanish then?
It's fair. I've described it sometimes as an old car, right? Sometimes with an older car in the winter, you need to warm it up a little bit. You can't just crank that engine and hit off, I was a guy who had a lot of big, lumbering, old American sedans. And I remember spending a lot of time warming it up. And sometimes it can be like that. my day job, I also work with a number of students whose first language isn't English. So, during the school year, on any given day, I'm having numerous conversations in Spanish with a student. Even though I teach English, I do encourage them that if they're not confident or they're a little confused about something, they want to ask me the question in Spanish, that I can respond to them then too. So it's become easier and easier. I'd say the toughest thing is probably the VTRs, the videos, and as well as the any in-ring promo, right? Because I don't know what's going to be said, right? Especially for an in-ring promo. So that's translating on the fly. So you're hearing, you've got English commentary in one ear on a low level, right? Now you've got the show audio going on. So you've got these two audios in your ear. And
I'd be overstimulated. I would be.
Yeah, and then what you need to do is, right, I can't translate word for word because a lot of things are idiomatic expressions. So you have to kind of wait until the sentence is over and then do your best. So that's probably the toughest thing. In terms of just sitting down and calling it, I'm good. Even between matches, sometimes we'll even chat, with commentary team. We'll chat in English for a second. That's coming up, and then we'll put our headsets and hola, ¿cómo están, amigos? ¿Todo está bien?
It goes straight back to Spanish.
Yep.
Okay, that's really cool. As we look at wrapping this up, because I do want to be respectful of your time, the question I end all my interviews on is with, do your work in Ring of Honor, with social media, with YouTube even, and streaming, as you said. We're all sort of going to live forever in some sort of very, very weird way. So what is one moment from your career that you want, or match that you want the good people to check out because of your commentary? And then what is one that you're like, if you could avoid that, I would appreciate it?
I would say, for me, Best in the World 2018 is probably, would be my roughest show, right? It was my first show on pay-per-view. I was incredibly anxious. I think it's on YouTube as well. The Roosh versus Bandito championship match that I want to say it was Best in the World 2021, last year's. There's a moment where on the English feed they pitched to us for the first time. Ray Horace and I are sitting on commentary, and they told me to look for the hard cam. So I had imagined the way that it was going to happen was they were going to have the camera right in front of them. Instead, it's halfway across the arena. Completely. So now you'll catch me, and my eyes are bug-eyed because this is the first time we're on screen, right? So I'm like, hi everyone. My eyes are big, and I'm glancing down at the monitor to make sure that I'm looking at the camera. So that was a little anxiety producing. But I would say if there's a show to watch, honestly, I would say, Super Card of Honor for me, right? I went in there and said, I'm just going to leave it all on the table. I left it all on the table. I put all of my emotion into every single match. The title match in particular at the end was a nice moment. So that was, for me, definitely, if you can catch that one. And honestly, Death Before Dishonor is a little different because I was calling a lot of play-by-play for Ring of Honor at first, and now that I've been brought in, I worked alongside Alvaro Riojas and Angelico, and I was more of there was a three-man booth, so that was a first for me. But I also went back to doing color, and I think for that switch, because to me it's a very big difference to do play-by-play in color. I actually felt really great about my performance and how everything went for the show. I think that actually in some ways doing color might actually suit me a little bit more. I'm amenable to both, but I would say avoid moment is 2018, Best in the World. And then, I would say the last two shows for me it feels like, every show you learn a little bit more. I watch myself. I listen to it again, as painful as it is sometimes when you hear your mistakes. But so what's going to be my best show? My next one.
Yeah. So if you guys like, no, where can the good people find you as we wrap this up, Rich?
Oh, well, you can find me on Twitter and on Instagram, Rich Lobezno. That's Lobezno, Lobezno. Just a little nod to a little wink nod there to Wolverine stuff. So I'll leave it at that. But yeah, just spelled just like that, Lobezno. And that's basically it. I'm just on Twitter and Instagram.
It's well worth doing, guys. So if you guys like this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talks Flourish. Follow me on Twitter at Tom Talks Flourish. Follow bodyslam.net on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, and on Twitter. And for my show with Cassidy Haynes, the Wrestle Watch Podcast, and follow the Wrestle Watch Podcast on Twitter to help us pick a match over a week. And I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.